This is Phantom Power.
Episode 16.
Soar and chill.
Hey, I'm Mack Hagood, and yes, you are hearing Calvin Harris on Phantom Power, the podcast on the sonic arts and humanities. Why, you might ask? Well, our guest today spends a lot of time listening to Calvin Harris and David Guetta. She calls them the Coke and Pepsi of pop electronic dance music, or EDM. As a musicologist, she's fascinated by how EDM pushes beyond tonality, that is, the harmonies and chord progressions that are the focus of blues-based rock and pop music. EDM cares more about timbre and rhythmic complexity, ear-catching sounds, and intense sonic experiences. Moments when the vocal stutters or the beat drops. Moments like this one, where the entire song begins to soar. But Robin James isn't just a musicologist, she's also a philosopher. She really wants to know what these songs can tell us about society. And while many cultural analyses of pop songs focus on song lyrics with a few vague gestures towards the sound, Robin James brings her musicological experience to bear, connecting musical structures to economic structures, not to mention structural racism and sexism. To my mind, the strength of her work is that she makes admirably bold and clear claims about why certain kinds of popular music are popular in a given moment. And whether or not you decide you agree with those claims by the end of this show, you may never hear an EDM soar quite the same way again. In today's episode, my co-host Chris Cheek and I have a lengthy free-form conversation and listening session with Robin, in which she breaks down EDM pop songs featured in her book, Resilience and Melancholy, Pop Music, Feminism, Neoliberalism. We also get into a bit of hip-hop, as well as songs from her current research into chill music in the streaming era. Robin James is Associate Professor of Philosophy at UNC Charlotte and co-editor of the Journal of Popular Music Studies. For the 2019-2020 academic year, she is also visiting Associate Professor of Music at Northeastern University. And by the way, she got her start in musicology and philosophy as an undergraduate at Miami University in Ohio, where Chris and I teach.
So I started college as an oboe major back in the 90s.
Huh.
And yeah.
You were playing oboe at Miami?
Yes.
Okay.
I played piccolo in the marching band.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be a conductor. I was taking philosophy classes and I realized that sort of the questions that music theorists asked sometimes were similar to the questions that philosophers asked, and that the questions that I was interested in about music were things like, why do people think this sounds good, right? For it to music to go this way as opposed to some other way, right? Or why does music sound certain ways in particular socio-historical moments? And those are really philosophical questions about music.
Yeah.
So then when I was deciding, like, what kind of graduate program do I want to go into? Do I want to go into like a musicology program? Do I want to go into a gender studies program? Do I want to go into a philosophy program? I said, well, in philosophy, I can do all of that stuff.
So in terms of good, is it that it makes you feel good? Or is it that it's good in relation to aesthetic standards that one has had brought down to you?
Both.
When you're thinking about music, yeah?
Both. And often, I think the the interesting things to think about are when those two are in conflict.
Yes.
So Khalifa Sana's Poptimism article came out in 2004, and that's when I was writing my dissertation. I finished it in 2005. And Poptimism is the idea that pop music or music traditionally devalued because it's associated with like teen girls is just as worthy of critical and intellectual attention as music that's traditionally received that attention, such as jazz or rock or art music or something like that. So I was writing my dissertation at that time, and part of what I was trying to think about was sort of the conflict between, you know, the elite aesthetic standards and what people like, right? So, for example, one of the things I did in the dissertation was show how, in some ways, Nietzsche was the first poptimist. With his arguments that Italian opera, because they make you feel good and they're kind of nonsensical and just fun, is better than German opera. So, so yeah, I was kind of thinking about the instances where what makes people feel good is in conflict with what the elites say is good, capital G.
So a kind of, I don't know, low art versus high art would be another way of putting this.
Yeah.
The kind of the things that you feel that you ought to develop an appreciation for because they're held to be culturally iconic as distinct from the thing that you just like.
Right. And for me, as a scholar of gender and race, that's interesting because those two factors are often deeply, deeply behind the conflict between the sort of critical standards and quote unquote guilty pleasures, right?
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of your work is asking, what is it about the social environment that makes certain musical sounds, like you said, feel good, right? Or feel pertinent, become popular. But then we could also flip that and say, what can the rise of certain musical sounds tell us about our society? Is there a way that musical sounds can tell us what's actually going on?
Yeah, and that's a great way to sort of describe what I try to do, because I think in a lot of ways what I'm interested in is understanding society and relations among people so we can be better at it.
Right.
And society is obviously vast and complicated, but pop songs are 3 minutes long. So they're much easier to study in their completeness.
Yeah.
We understand songs because they contain structures that make sense to us as a structure, right? And those structures that we hear in songs also structure things out in the world, right? So gender would be one example. You know, we use gender to organize everything from like what kind of bag, what we call the kind of bag someone carries, to bathrooms, to all sorts of things, right? But we also use gender to organize relationships among sounds, right? And Susan McClary's famous example about, you know, the cadence or the song that ends on a strong beat is called masculine, and the song that ends on a weak beat is called feminine, because we associate masculinity with strength and femininity with weakness, right? So I try to find these structures in songs as sort of analogs or microscopic versions of the structures or logics or relationships that we experience macroscopically in our relations with each other, with the world, out in society. Yeah.
Now, is this a different question from what we might call like a hermeneutics of music?
This is maybe where I get all nitpicky philosopher.
Yeah.
But so I would understand hermeneutics to be something where you're interpreting a hidden meaning, right? You're revealing something underneath the surface.
Yes.
And that's one way of understanding meaning, like a hidden content, but I don't know that I'm necessarily doing that, right? Like I'm not finding the expressed or hidden meaning so much as trying to figure out how it works and why does it work this way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And in that way, I think I'm thinking kind of like a music theorist.
Can we have a look at some of the ways in which you break these pop songs down to show how they're working and what kind of affect they're producing?
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe we could start with one musical feature that you have studied, which is the soar.
Yeah. So the soar is a device that I identify as sort of coming from early 21st century dubstep. Then sort of filtering up into the early 2010s top 40, right? Remember this sort of EDM boom?
Yeah.
It's been around for a while, but it kind of rose to the top of the pop charts and became kind of a common language in pop songwriting around 2009, 2010. And what it does is it's a way to build and release tension in a song, right? To build a climax is what it does. So what the soar does is it uses rhythmic intensification to build the song up to a climax and then release that tension. You guys have probably heard of Zeno's paradox, right? That's the thing where you go half the distance and then half of that again and then half of that again and half again down to infinity. So that's what the soar kind of does with rhythmic events, right? Like, so it'll go from take a hand clap from quarter notes to eighth notes to 16th notes, and oftentimes it'll try to approach the sort of limit of human hearing. Things are going so fast you can't hear distinct events. So that's kind of what the soar is trying to do, right? And that's how it creates tension, right? It's acting like it's trying to break the limit of your hearing. So this is an example of a soar in an early-ish dubstep song, right? This is Scream's sort of most well-known breakout single. So if we're talking kind of the origins of dubstep, this would be recognized as a significant song. Here it is. Listen to the hand claps. See how it just doubled?
Yeah.
And there's the drop and the downbeat. All right.
Yeah. There it is.
Totally. And so maybe this will go nowhere as a question, but if you're on the dance floor, what happens?
Usually that's the moment where there's everybody sort of takes a breath, and then sort of like when I would be dancing, you emphasize that downbeat, right? The soar makes the next downbeat feel like it's falling harder, because that's kind of the big moment. Sometimes at festivals, people will scream during the drop.
Right.
Yeah, so this is LMFAO's Party Rock Anthem. This is kind of the quintessence of big, dumb EDM pop of the early decade. I love this song because it's just fun and loud and off the chain, is what I'd say. Okay, it's going to start now.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Yeah. So it's sort of building up to this climactic moment and then releasing the tension on the downbeat.
Yeah, totally.
So in some senses, what the soar is doing is it's replacing dissonance, like harmonic dissonance. So like a blues song or a rock song would build that tension with chord changes.
Yeah.
But pop chord changes have never been sort of especially central to pop, and the soar sort of lets them fall entirely sort of to secondary status, right? Because they're not the thing driving the building of tension and release. It's really sort of rhythmic and timbral instead of harmonic.
Yeah. I think those two examples really show it quite clearly, and your explanation is super clear. So maybe we can get you to sort of take off your musicologist hat now and put on your philosopher hat, because I mean, what you do in your book, Resilience and Melancholy, Pop Music, Feminism, Neoliberalism, is you note how this musical feature of the soar gets deployed in millennial pop music. It seems like it gets paired with certain kinds of lyrical content and certain kinds of identities. And so you sort of unpack that for the reader, and then you have a critique of it. So could you get into that for us?
Sure. So you remember how I said the soar is like implying the transgression of the limits of human hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do in the book, so the titular word resilience is a word you hear a lot, right? So this idea of overcoming limitations or damage or harm to be, stronger than you were before, right? Or turning a crisis into a resource. So what I argue in the book is that the soar is sort of a sonic representation of this logic of resilience, right? It sort of creates this tension and then implies this sonic transgression or damage that then becomes the sort of, right, it's not actually harmful, but aesthetically, what it gives you is a sort of an increased or augmented pleasure on the experience of the next downbeat. Right. So that's it's representing in music the sort of experience that resilience is supposedly, or in theory, supposed to be, right? You turn harm, things that damage you, into advantages, right? So in the book, what I do is I note that a lot of the discussion of resilience, just sort of in general, tends to take women and women's experiences of the harms of patriarchy as sort of central examples of resilience. So, and you can see this in a lot of what Sarah Bannett Weiser calls popular feminist discourse, right? This idea that women are capable of sort of individually overcoming the limits that or the harms that patriarchy does them, right? So, you experience sexual harassment at work, but you overcome it and you become an entrepreneur, and now you're this successful business person, right? So this narrative of, or, like, perhaps you are a poor girl of color, but you study really hard and get into Harvard or something, right? So this narrative of resilience is really pervasive, and it's often used as a sort of faux solution for the harms of oppression, right?
Right. Concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. That kind of weird juxtaposition too. And not quite, but what doesn't kill you makes you dance.
Well, or I think in the book I call it something like Nietzsche and Kanye's what doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Right.
Can we listen to some examples of this pairing of the soar, of this intensification with, lyrical content about resilience?
Sure. Do you want to do the ludicrous song first?
Okay.
You kind of have to hear the lyrics. Because they're all about taking risks, right? Risks that could be overwhelming, but doing it anyway and winning, right? So there's this logic of sort of, I'm going to expose myself to all this potential harm, but that's necessary in order for me to live my best life.
If you live for something, you're not alone, my friend. So fill up your cup and would you light up a toast to life? They say what don't kill me can make me stronger. So
And there you go.
should help me live longer. I blow some smoke just to give my lungs a test. Cause why tiptoe through life to arrive safely at death? I'm on a journey, yeah, I'm on a roll. Sometimes gotta close my eyes just to open my soul. And tonight is the night I got a feeling that I'm about to act a fool. So if you go fix some drinks, me and Ursula about to break some rules. That's some red and gold, but the
Right? So he's talking about all these kinds of transgressions.
the fast life.
The fast life.
Oh, for broke a lesson I can't afford, but for what it's worth, I'm ready to pay for the rest of my life.
And here comes the soar. There's this really interesting sort of like the American flag and David Guetta appear right at the climax of the soar. So there's this weird sort of gesture towards American nationalism and whiteness, as though those are the two things that allow Black men talking about risk taking to succeed rather than succumb to those risks, right? Because we all know that like Black men are one of the most criminalized populations in the States, and you know, even doing law-abiding things, they get arrested and beaten up and stuff like that, right? So risk-taking is even more risky for them, right? But here we have this sort of song about risk-taking is good. I'm going to expose myself to all this damage, but the thing that insulates me from the negative consequences of that, oh, the American flag and David Guetta.
Maybe this would be a good time to dive a little more deeply into your critique here of neoliberalism, because I want to draw out why it would be advantageous to sort of represent people of color and women as taking these chances and overcoming things like that. I think, people might be surprised to hear that a feminist philosopher is actually rather critical of these kinds of representations. That it might seem like that would be something that you would celebrate. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So overcoming the harms of oppression is something that oppressed people have had to do for centuries. But what's different now, and what's different with resilience discourse, is that it, like all aspects of neoliberalism, it privatizes it, right? It makes individuals responsible for fixing systemic issues, but it also sort of takes the fixing or healing that one might need to do in response to the harms of oppression and basically co-opts it for those mechanisms of oppression, so that the healing process doesn't actually fix anything, it just feeds the oppression and contributes to it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So if old school capitalism was, you work for the same employer your whole lifetime, and you're a company man intended there, right? Like,
Yeah.
It was definitely hierarchical and patriarchal and racist, right?
Yeah.
But it did also have its kind of a certain kind of safety to it, which there's a lot of nostalgia for now among people like Donald Trump. Neoliberal capitalism offers a whole lot more under the guise of freedom. It takes away the social safety net. It says anybody can come in. Women are invited. Minorities are invited. In fact, you're required to come in and work because the social safety net has been removed. Lifetime employment is gone because, life has become liquid and corporations are allowed to fire you when they want.
The gig economy.
Yeah, we enter the gig economy. And so you are required to be resilient no matter who you are. You need to overcome all of these things that this intensification of capitalism and this deregulation of markets have thrown our way. Is that a fair way to sort of characterize what you're talking about here?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the sort of lower social status you have, or the lower you are on the privilege hierarchy, the more stuff you have to overcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so maybe one thing that I really like about what you do in your book is you really integrate, because there are a lot of critiques of neoliberalism out there, but not all of them focus on the roles of race and gender the way you do.
Neoliberalism is all about efficiency, right? It tries to achieve the goals of old school capitalism and classical liberalism with less of a cost, right? So you could police the purity of identity categories, and that's sort of what the one drop rule would be an example of, right? We're policing the purity of whiteness, but that takes a lot of resources to do, right? You have to work very hard at that, be vigilant about it. So one of the ways that neoliberalism upgrades old school forms of sexism and racism and all the other isms is by basically deregulating those boundaries, right? So we're not going to police the boundaries of purity. We are going to instead demand mixing, right? But we're going to do this in a field where the background conditions are rigged, so that even though we're sort of not policing boundaries, it will be more or less impossible for the individuals that have been traditionally excluded to succeed.
My God. So I'm reminded of a lyric from the early hip hop days. From last night, a DJ saved my life. There ain't a thing that I can't fix, 'cause I can put it in the mix.
Yeah. And Lester Spence actually has a couple of books that talk about sort of hip hop culture's adoption of the rhetoric of neoliberalism, right? So,
right.
He talks about how, we've got the figure of the hustler is sort of a black version of the neoliberal entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And so the soar is kind of an example of how this resistance and resilience get co-opted, or this kind of message of resistance, right? Like this would have been a transgressive message at some point in time, and yet it's able to get sort of appropriated by the system that it was resisting. Mm-hmm. And yet for the individual who's enjoying this music, it's still sort of like equipment for living, so to speak, right? Like that experience of listening to that kind of music, dancing to the soar, feeling that intensification, to my mind, and maybe this is my chance to nitpick, but it goes beyond representation, right? It's not just representing this kind of neoliberal capitalism, but it's doing it to the body, right? Your body, your nervous system is experiencing this, and then coming out on the other side of it, feeling invigorated and feeling stronger. And in that way, it's like the kind of thing that helps people move through their lives, right? So I feel like there's something really interesting happening here, where from the subjective position of the individual, this music is helping people get through their day or get through their week. They can't wait for the weekend to come and dance to this music. And yet it can still be supportive of the system that's making their life such a travail to begin with. Yeah,
and I think that's just popular music in the 20th and 21st century. And I don't, like commercial music is inherently part of this exploitative system. And I think you could even go all the way back and say things like, well, racism and sexism have been baked into our aesthetic norms since we've had the idea of race or gender. Yeah. So there's never going to be this sort of unproblematic artwork that we can experience. So the fact that there's this dynamic where, on the one hand, these songs are literally sort of, you could either say they're kind of training us in the experience of resilience, or they make sense to us and we like them because we've already been so inculcated in this ideology that we want our leisure time activities to also take this same shape that we have to form our lives into in sort of work, right? But I think I like those songs.
Yeah.
I think they're fun songs, and I think the thing about art, in its sort of interpretive, and I think more importantly in its sort of social context, it can be more than what it is as a commodity or just as an object, right? That's the awesome thing about art, right? By listening to this music or dancing to it together, or by talking about it, we're sort of participating in social relations that have the potential to not be as messed up or oppressive as the sorts of logics perhaps encoded in some of the songs, if that makes any sense at all, right? It's the making and sharing and being together that the artworks foster that I think is the really I don't necessarily, that's the work of freedom, right? If you want to put it that way, right? That's the cool thing about art that I think lets it work for social justice.
What Victor Turner called communitas.
Yeah.
And there are, though, some examples that you give of types of musical forms that maybe provide that sort of being together, yet also maybe throw a little sand into the gears of neoliberal capitalism instead of greasing the wheels. Could you maybe talk about an example of that?
Sure. So this would be the sort of other word in the title, melancholy. So what got me thinking about this was people's reaction to Rihanna's response to Chris Brown after he assaulted her, right? So her Unapologetic album came out and she did a duet with him. And people were furious because that was not the proper sort of quote unquote feminist response, right? She didn't disavow him. She didn't perform the overcoming, right? Oh, I was assaulted. I reject my assault, the person who assaulted me. I have overcome the damage. I'm a quote unquote feminist now. So initially I saw the sort of rejection of resilience in Rihanna's own behavior. But then I listened to the album, and what you can hear on the album are structures that gesture towards the soar, but don't do the work that they do, right? They don't sort of build this climax, right? So in a way, in the same way that Rihanna didn't sort of perform resilience for the pleasure of her fans, the songs don't perform soars for aesthetic pleasure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Maybe can we listen to an example of that?
Sure. Did you want to do Diamonds?
Yeah. Okay, so let's listen to Diamonds by Rihanna.
I think it's important to note that the lyrics are all about shining like diamonds, right? So this is, on the one hand, about sort of celebrating strength and beauty in things, but it doesn't sound like a celebratory song.
Shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright like a diamond. Fine light in the beautiful sea. I chose to be happy. You and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting star, I see, a vision of ecstasy. When you hold me, I'm alive. We're like diamonds in the sky. I knew that we'd become one right away.
coming up to where the soar should be.
We're beautiful like diamonds in the sky. Eye to eye, so alive. We're beautiful like diamonds in the sky. Shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright like a diamond. Oh, shining bright.
So this is where the soar should be.
Diamonds in the sky. Shine bright like a diamond.
And you've got the repetitions in the lyrics,
Yeah.
but it doesn't go anywhere.
Palms rise to the universe as we
Right, so we're back at another verse.
But in some ways it was happening in the keyboards and the strings. The keyboards went from being these more statuesque chords that we're hearing right now into doubling, and then we had strings doing staccato intervals built off the doubling of the keyboards.
Yeah, but there was never the...
It's
like
not
it sort of
happening in the
started.
drum.
Yeah, it's sort of gestured there, but there
Yeah.
wasn't the... Right, there was some doubling, but then it didn't quadruple
We're in there now, yeah.
or octuple. So yeah, that's what I mean. It's gesturing towards this, but not completing it.
But also we've got this this other thing that you've talked about a lot, which is the stuttering or the sampling of the voice to repeat and to repeat. And I'm thinking about a really old-fashioned term like delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, part of pop songwriting now, and this is in part due to streaming, right? So you have to get people to listen for more than 30 minutes.
Right.
But part of it's just due to other aesthetic factors. But delayed gratification is something that you don't just... It's not important, right? Because that structure of the discipline that you need in order to sort of wait and delay sort of
great.
runs against the kind of risk taking
Right.
and imperative to transgress that you heard about, for example, from Ludacris
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah. So it's not even like it's trying to delay gratification. It's almost more just like saying something like, I know what you expect me to do enough to sort of gesture at it, but I'm refusing to do the work that you want from me.
I love
Right?
that.
I'm not going to do the work of performing pleasure for you or generating that energy for you.
So it's not just resilience, it's resistance.
But it reads as failure. So it's or refusal.
Refusal.
Right? It's a refusal, but it reads as failure. And the reason why I called it melancholy was
Right.
because, so traditionally, melancholy is the inability to get over something, right? So Freud distinguishes between mourning, which is sort of, getting some resolution after a loss of something, and then melancholy would be the failure of mourning, right? Like you never actually come to terms with the loss. So if that's what melancholy traditionally means, then we can sort of think it as the refusal of resilience, right? It's the failure to overcome sufficiently, right?
Or I'm thinking about the classic Dürer image of melancholia, that sense of dwelling in a refusal to overcome.
So from the perspective of resilience discourse, that's what the refusal to overcome looks like. Now, from the perspective of the person doing that refusal, it might feel fine.
Yes.
Right? It just appears from the head to be a failure and a sort of this, I don't know what you would call misery or a total downer from the perspective of resilience discourse.
So there's
right?
a certain satisfaction, or even arguably a pleasure, in dwelling in the resistance to the dwelling in the refusal to overcome.
Yeah, and it may actually be like a healthy response to trauma.
Right.
Right? Because what I'm arguing is that resilience discourse masks itself as a sort of healthful response to trauma, but what might actually be healthful for individual people in various social locations might look entirely different.
Right.
Right. So doing what you actually need to recuperate from the trauma will appear pathological from the perspective of resilience discourse, but at the sort of level of individual subjects, it'll feel maybe not fine, but at least it'll feel something like some kind of healing or resolution or moving on or something.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that's a kind of like a different version of what Mack was talking about earlier, from a very different direction in terms of an equipment for living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things I also thought was important to mention in the book is that oftentimes people in oppressed groups will perform what could otherwise be considered resilience or overcoming or whatever, but because of their identities, they will be judged as failing at it.
Yeah.
Right? So in the same way that like criminalization works such that, Lisa Cachot in the introduction to her book on criminalization and social deaths contrasts the way white victims of Katrina and black victims of Katrina were described when they went out looking for food.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One was people were looking for food, and the other was looting.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a similar dynamic at work with resilience or melancholy. Right. The same behavior is going to be differently evaluated or described from the hegemonic perspective, depending upon the identities of who's doing it and how we perceive those identities, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, it gives us a way to think about the sort of dark melancholy sound that has crept into hip hop over the past decade, whereas
Earl Sweatshirt and people like that.
Yeah, well, and Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak was kind of considered like a bit of a failure of an album at the time, but gosh, it was a real harbinger of what was to come. And also there seems to be a sort of kind of refusal with sort of so-called mumble rappers to like really perform.
She said, you're the worst, I cannot die bigger than my universe. I don't really care if you cry, I don't really shouldn't have a lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to die. Push me to the edge, all my friends are dead. Push me to the edge, all my friends are dead. Push me to the edge, all my friends are dead. Push me to the edge.
It's kind of a similar refusal that I see in Rihanna's work, where she's like, this is for me, this isn't necessarily for you at all,
So what's interesting is that those rappers are almost entirely men.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? And there might be a way to sort of read this as a sort of refusal of resilience as gendered feminine.
Uh-huh.
That sort of, this idea of resilience has become gendered and racialized as a feature of low status groups, right? So in order to be able to be the most resilient, you have to start at the bottom. So I think back in 2015 when the book came out, this sort of maximalism was gendered masculine, right? Like, so if you think about what Ludacris was talking about, right? I think the next verse that we didn't listen to, he talks about basically something like, if I lose my balance in case I fall, just know it'll be from women, weed, and alcohol, right? So it's this sort of macho transgression. But
yeah, and I mean, we could even go further back, because I remember when I was first teaching university students, dubstep was the province of like nerds, a certain kind of music nerd.
Yeah.
And then it became like, so-called bro step, and it was all the fraternity dudes with the much more hegemonic vision of masculinity dancing through their heads. It was really interesting to see that transformation take place. So it's interesting for me to hear that this idea that this kind of intensification has become gendered female.
Mm-hmm. In these past 4 years, right? It's happened like that.
Yeah.
But what you see now, the sad rappers, but you also, even the EDM inflected top 40 stuff is much less maximalist, right? We might even call it chill, right? So there's been the sort of pivot away from, remember YOLO? You only live once.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a sort of pendulum swing away from that maximalism and towards a more sort of chill, toned down, right? I mean, Taylor Swift even has a song telling people to calm down in the title.
Yeah.
You are somebody that I don't know, but you're taking shots at me like it's Patron, and I'm just like, damn, it's 7 a.m. Say it in the street, that's a knockout, but just say it in a tweet, that's a cop-out, and I'm just like, hey, are you okay? And I ain't trying to mess with your self-expression, but I've learned a lesson that stressing and obsessing about somebody else is no fun. And snakes and stones never broke my bones, so you need to calm down. You're being too loud, and I'm just like, you need to just stop. Like, can you just not slip on my gown? You need to calm down.
And it's just happened so rapidly, but I think it definitely has happened to the point that we might even be moving on to something else. I don't know what yet.
I mean, in some senses, that's what you're mapping is beginning to imitate a night out, with kind of people getting into this kind of sort of raging, ecstatic moments around midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then the chill out, the ambient space, and all of that.
Yeah.
We're at the after party.
We are.
Right now.
Yeah.
It's almost time to go to the diner for breakfast.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe let's talk about chill. I'm trying to think about if there's a musical form, an analog to the soar that we could talk about, because I like how concrete the soar is.
Yeah, so it's really present today in just toned down soars. Soars are still there, but they're at like 2 rather than 11, right? So the build is much more subtle, right? So you'll have that same sort of structure of like, there's a little bit of a build and a drop and then the downbeat. So do you want to talk about Thank You Next?
Sure.
But this one gon' last, 'cause her name is Aubrey, and I'm so good with that. So good with that. She taught me patience, how she handles pain. That shit's amazing.
The soar is so minuscule. It's like an Ariana Grande size soar.
Look what I found. No need for searching. And what I said, thank you.
And there it was. You just had that little sort of swoosh or cymbal roll up, and then there was the downbeat, and it's over.
In your work lately, you've moved from identifying soars into identifying this kind of more chill form that is dominating pop music right now. Do you want to talk about like any analogous changes that you think are going on socially that are making this feel like it makes sense and sounds good, as you put it?
Sure. Yeah. So I think Thank You Next is a really good example of it, because it's about Grande sort of overcoming a breakup and learning to love herself. I mean, that's literally the narrative of the lyrics. So it's something we might frame as a kind of resilience, but the way it's expressed or represented is totally different than what we got 5 or 10 years ago, right? It's all about sort of her expressing her capacity to, I like to put it as sort of maintain productivity amid outrageous circumstances, right? So Chris Richards, the Washington Post music critic, talked a few years ago. He had a piece about...
Is this the guy who hates podcasts?
I don't know.
I think he wrote a whole column on how he hates podcasts. But anyway, go on.
Well, anyway, yeah, he had a piece on sort of the popularity of people talking about Xanax and pop music.
Yeah.
Right? So anti-anxiety medicine is really common now for probably good reason, right? Like, you know, the world seems to be falling apart around us,
right,
both in literal and figurative ways. So this idea of, you know, sort of taking anti-anxiety medicine or listening to a chill playlist or being mindful is a way to sort of maintain your productivity and keep on going amid all of this stuff, right? So it's a way to sort of keep people working and distract them and keep them sort of doing what they otherwise should be doing, when in fact we should be outraged.
Right.
At
It's
all
all
this
about
stuff
productivity. Yeah.
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 So,
and this is what, you know, my recent book is all about, using sound technologies to be able to concentrate when you need to concentrate and sleep when you need to sleep. So sort of manage your own affect. And it's interesting to look at sort of like the ads for noise canceling headphones, and the Beats noise canceling headphones are really aimed at women and people of color and marketed through experiences of racism and sexism. But the message, as you said earlier about music, it's really about individualizing these problems and giving someone a technology to tune it out.
right, exactly.
The way you rise above is to not hear the haters.
Yeah, exactly. Be resilient, overcome it, tune it out. Yeah, so the effect of this, and you see this in Taylor Swift's new single, right, is that outrage becomes seen as something belonging to people of either low social status or odious political belief.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Rather than something that, like, yeah, we should be outraged at the destruction of the environment. We should be outraged at concentration camps full of children, right?
Yeah. And so this move to chill, I mean, we see this in the very technology of the streaming platforms, right? Where the streaming platforms are built more around desired moods, affects, type of activity that you're going to do to the music, productivity, working out, than they are organized around genres the way that music stores were, you know, still are those that exist. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Liz Pelly gave a really good talk about this at PopCon last year, and I think it was published in the Baffler a few months ago. But she took a deep dive into Spotify, as she did that. That's her thing. And she tried listening to sad playlists, right? Playlists about grief, playlists about feeling bad. And she noticed that she was almost immediately redirected to feel-good stuff. And so she looked into the way that Spotify represented itself to advertisers, you know, sort of how it talked about itself to advertisers. And she argues that Spotify wants people to feel good when it's listening to Spotify, because advertisers want listeners to feel good about the brands advertised on Spotify. Right?
I love this.
Yeah. So
crazy.
Spotify doesn't want you to feel bad because its advertisers don't want you to associate negative emotions with their brand, right? So Spotify has this own sort of business interest in mood management, user mood management.
So if you buy Spotify Premium, are you allowed to listen to sad music?
Who knows?
It's ad-free.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe that's why YouTube keeps trying to get me to take out one of their their ad-free subscriptions because I never listen to anything uplifting.
You just listen to dense walls of noise,
I
Chris.
do. I'm interested in listening to steam trains and things like that. Yeah. Cars on the freeway.
Well, that's interesting because I think one of the sort of places in the pop music world that is definitely unchill these days and it is tied to a progressive politics is industrial techno.
Absolutely.
And not all the artists are totally sort of politically engaged, but people like Paula Temple in particular and Perk also.
Yeah.
They're both queer artists who have released explicitly political music from a progressive perspective. And that I think does express, some people like to call it hard or angry music, but interestingly, both of them have said in various ways, I don't think my music is angry, I think it's joyous. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's an example of just strong emotion, which chill, like I said earlier, codes as either pathological or politically regressive. So I think it's interesting to look for places where sort of sonic maximalism and the strong emotions it implies are explicitly associated with a progressive politics. And that's one place I think you can find it. And I've been calling it, at one point I called it angry melancholy, but then I found the interviews where the artists were like, it's not angry. So I'm trying to find an adjective to describe what kind of melancholy it is, because it's not the sort of meh melancholy that I talked about in the book, but it's melancholy in that it's a similar sort of failure to perform the required affective attunement, right? Which in this case would be something like chill.
Cameron on a guillotine. Was that inspired by the Black Mirror episode with the pig?
Yeah, well, so it's definitely about Brexit.
Yeah.
I actually first heard the song on a Rinse FM show the day after the Brexit vote. So it's sort of circulating as an anti-Brexit song.
Oh, let's listen to a moment of that. I mean, this sounds so retro to me.
Yeah.
Me too.
It makes me nostalgic.
But it's kind of itchy and frenetic.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so to me, that sort of represents like, like when I'm tapping my toe and I just, I'm full of energy and I can't calm down and I'm nervous about something, right? That's very unchill.
Yeah. It's definitely not chill. All right. Well, this has been great. Do we have anything else that we should discuss? Like any things that we haven't covered?
So what's the next book about?
It's called The Sonic Episteme, and it's about how theorists, pop science writers use concepts of sound to create qualitative versions of the relationships that neoliberalism creates quantitatively.
I love that.
One of the things I talk about is how pop science writers use the idea of resonance to translate the probabilistic math behind either some kinds of data science or some kinds of string theory into terms that lay people can understand.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and that's out in December.
Is there something that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Yeah. Anything?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you for talking with us. This one it'll be really interesting to edit
Mac's going to be spending the next 4 months making it into a 2-minute piece.
Hopefully not 2 minutes, but
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
yeah. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's it for this episode of Phantom Power. Thanks to Robin James for being on the show. You can learn more about Phantom Power, find transcripts and links to the things we talked about, and previous episodes of the show, all at phantompod.org. You can also subscribe to our show there or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you'd rate and review us in Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Today's show was edited by Mack Hagood. Our intern is Gina Morovich. Phantom Power is produced with support from the Robert H. and Nancy J. Blaney Endowment, the Miami University Humanities Center, and the National Endowment for the Humanities.